Hi everybody, and welcome back to Trudge, a journey to being recovered. My name is Dexter. I am a recovered drug addict alcoholic. Welcome back to the program. I hope everyone is doing well. Last week we read step 6 out of the 12 steps in the 12 traditions, and this week we are going to piggyback that and read step 7 out of the same book. We're at the point where we are looking at our grosser handicaps that were revealed to us from doing our inventory that we took in step 4, and we are identifying them and asking God to remove them in steps 6 and 7. Let's go ahead and get started. We have quite a bit to do. There's a couple paragraphs we're going to read in the big book, which is going to start on page 76, and then we're going to jump over to the 12 and 12, and we're going to read that chapter, step 7. Asked him to remove our shortcomings in reference to our higher power. So let's go ahead and open our book study like we open all our book studies with the third step prayer for those of us who care to join. This is on page 63. It should be highlighted pink for those of you who are just joining in the program. Let's go ahead, take a second, invite God in, and get started. God, I offer myself to Thee to build with me and to do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always. Thanks to those of you who joined in. Let's go to page 76 in our big book. So, top of the page, we have the 6-step actions and the 6-step prayer. Highlighted pink should be the last thing that you have on your page. So, in reference to being willing to let go of whatever character defects that you have found associated with your 4th-step inventory and that have come to you through prayer and meditation, says, when ready, we say something like this. That's going to be highlighted green. That implies action. Okay, so when you're ready, you're going to say something like this, and there's something like this that follows that statement. This is going to be the 7th-step prayer. This is going to be something anybody who has worked a solid 6th and 7th step in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous or otherwise, they know this prayer. This is kind of like an extension, in my estimation, of the 3rd step prayer, step 3. Okay, and it's going to be highlighted pink. It says, "My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and to my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen." So, specific prayers for what specific things we're looking at, whether it be procrastination, infidelity, theft, manipulation, whatever your character defects are. When we're ready and we want God to remove them, they've been identified now. This is what we're powering up. This is the prayer that we're going to use. So let's go ahead and close our big book, because that's all that's written in our big book for step 6 and 7. A little shocking to me, even though it is quite simple, the basis of doing those steps. I needed more. My sponsors, they took me through the 12 and 12 for step 6 and step 7, so that I'm going to do the same with you. So on page 70 in our 12 and 12, let's go ahead and open that book and get started. You'll still need the same tools, all your highlighters and pen. And it says, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. This humility is the humility that's been gained through steps 4 and 5. It says, since this step so specifically concerns itself with humility, and every time you see the word humility, guys, we're going to go ahead and underline that or circle it. It needs to be shown that how many times it is written here, what it is that, Bill W. is really trying to get us to understand about this step. We should pause here to consider what humility is and what the practice of it can mean to us. Indeed, the attainment of greater humility is the foundation principle of each of AA's 12 steps. For without some degree of humility, no alcoholic can stay sober at all. So, that's real important. Obviously, we're going to underline the word humility every time we see it. The word no, as in no alcoholic, we're going to circle that. They're telling you that no alcoholic can stay sober at all without some measure of this precious thing that we need, this humility, this gift, okay? And the words stay sober, I have them underlined. I don't know about you guys. I want to stay sober. I want that problem to be removed. I don't want to be sober only to have some storm show up in my life and then end up relapsing around that. I want to stay sober. It's telling you, without attainment of some measure of humility, no alcoholic can stay sober at all. Very important. Nearly all AAs have found, too, that unless they develop much more of this precious quality than may be required just for sobriety, okay, so there's some that's required for just not drinking, okay, but they still haven't much of a chance of becoming truly happy, okay, so there's more humility that's needed in an effort to be recovered, is what they're telling you. Okay, and I have the words truly happy highlighted yellow. That's promised to you. Happy, joyous, and free as the result of finding that humility, of working these steps, living these steps, following these clear-cut directions. They're telling you that without it, they cannot live to much useful purpose or in adversity be able to summon the faith that can meet any emergency. So you're going to need this humility, okay? It's not something that you kind of just get for this specific set. You need to have this, to continue on with this newfound life that you have, okay? The words summon the faith, they're going to be highlighted orange. They're telling you that, when life shows up, you're going to need that so you can tap into your newfound power, so you can, channel in with your higher power, with God of your understanding. So, when that emergency shows up, you'll be ready, okay? It's telling you, it's basically letting you know in that first paragraph that humility is absolutely vital. Not only to just step 7, but to the whole program, okay? This is going to be underlined. It says humility as a word, as an ideal, has a very bad time of it in our world. Not only is the idea misunderstood, the word itself is often intensely disliked. Many people haven't even a nodding acquaintance with humility as a way of life. Much of the everyday talk we hear, and a great deal of what we read, highlights man's pride in his own achievements. With great intelligence, men of science have been forcing nature to disclose her secrets. The immense resources now being harnessed promise such a quantity of material blessings that many have come to believe that a man-made millennium lies just ahead. Poverty will disappear and there will be such abundance that everyone can have all the security and personal satisfactions he desires. The theory seems to be that once everybody's primary instincts are satisfied, there won't be much left to quarrel about. The world will then turn happy and be free to concentrate on culture and character. Solely by their own intelligence and labor, men will have shaped their own destiny. Certainly no alcoholic, and surely no member of AA, wants to deprecate material achievement. Nor do we enter into debate with many who still so passionately cling to the belief that to satisfy our own basic natural desires is the main object of life. But we are sure, in the words we are sure circled, okay, that no class of people in the world ever made a worse mess of trying to live by this formula than alcoholics. Drug addicts, alcoholics. There's no question about it, Me, it was all about what I could get to make me feel better. And then when I got it all, the car, the house, the nice girlfriend, I didn't feel better. I had no program to fall back on, and the day came where, if I'm going to be this unhappy with all this stuff, why not just drink? Fortunately, that didn't occur to me, but that's what happens for a lot of us. For thousands of years, we have been demanding more than our share of security, prestige, and romance. When we seemed to be succeeding, we drank to dream still greater dreams. When we were frustrated, even in part, we drank for oblivion. This is going to be underlined. It says, never was there enough of what we thought we wanted. There was never enough for me. Never enough food, money, sex, drugs. It was, I was always thinking about the next one. It was never enough. And I went through this clean and sober, as well as, out in the streets. It's just never enough. Thinking that after being clean for a while, I need to start amassing things that show success. Nice house, nice car. Didn't work. In all these strivings, so many of them well-intentioned, our crippling handicap had been our lack of humility. That's my story. Lack of humility is going to be underlined. We had lacked perspective to see that the character building and spiritual values had to come first, and that material satisfactions were not the purpose of living. See, I had it backwards. I had no relationship with a power greater than myself. There was no spiritual values I had. I just was clean and sober. And I thought, well, now's the time to get stuff. I'm not spending money on drugs and alcohol. I can put it towards trying to amass nice clothes, nice colognes, want a house, get a nice car, and these things were going to make me who I was. I was confused. I had it all backwards. I knew nothing about any of this. Quite characteristically, we had gone all out and confusing the ends with the means. I know I did. Instead of regarding the satisfaction of our material desires as the means by which we could live and function as human beings, we had taken these satisfactions to be the final end and aim of life. House, dog, marriage, picket fence, 2.5 kids. That's not what we're talking about here. True, most of us thought good character was desirable, but obviously good character was something that one needed to get on with the business of being self-satisfied. This is going to be underlined. It says, with a proper display of honesty and morality, we'd stand a better chance of getting what we really wanted. And I have the words "we really wanted" underlined. I mean, highlighted as well as underlined. What is it that we really want? First of all, we need to know what we really wanted. Second of all, you've got a better chance of getting it doing this, doing the latter rather than the former. We need to show just a proper display of honesty and morality. We're going to get what we want more times than not if it's God's will for us, okay? But whenever we had to choose between character and comfort, the character building was lost in the dust of our chase after what we thought was happiness. Seldom do we look at character building as something desirable in itself, something we would like to strive for, whether our instinctual needs were met or not. I know I never did. I was just trying to get as much as I could, and my character suffered because of it, and I didn't care as long as I got it. Selfish, self-centered. That's the root of our troubles, okay? We're going to highlight this orange and underline it. It says, we never thought of making honesty, tolerance, and true love of man and God the daily basis of living. I know I didn't. God was just there when I needed him, and other than that, I was on my own program, doing my own thing. This lack of anchorage to any permanent values, this blindness to the true purpose of our lives, produced another bad result. This is going to be underlined. It says, for just so long as we were convinced that we could live exclusively by our own individual strength and intelligence, just that long was a working faith in a higher power impossible. So basically, left to your own devices, self-sufficiency, self-dependency, as long as you're in that mode, as long as you're in that thinking, you're going to be as far as you can be away from a higher power thinking that way, okay? You're not going to be able to have that working faith in a power greater than yourself because you're going to be too busy putting it into yourself, okay? This is true even when we believe that God existed. That happened to me. I always believed in a God universal, but for me, it was just about getting what I want, doing what I want, taking what I want. It was just all about me. I didn't care about anyone else but myself. We could actually have earnest religious beliefs which remained barren because we were still trying to play God ourselves. And this happens to a lot of people who have religious convictions and deep religious backgrounds. It's not unusual what we're reading here. The next sentence is going to be highlighted orange. It says, as long as we place self-reliance first, a genuine reliance upon a higher power is out of the question. I can't put myself first. It can't just be all about me. What is it God wants for me? Thinking about others first. What can I do to do God's work? That kind of altruistic thinking, living is what we're talking about here. Without that, that reliance on a power greater than yourself, it's completely out of the question, okay? The basic ingredient of all humility, the desire to seek and do God's will, it's missing, okay? And it was missing for me. For us, the process of gaining a new perspective was unbelievably painful. It was only by repeated humiliations that we were forced to learn something about humility. So, if there was any sentence in this whole chapter that is my story, it's that one. Okay, it's only by repeated humiliations that we were forced to learn something about humility. Whether it was sticking my foot in my mouth, or getting caught in lies and manipulations. I didn't come into this brimming with love and willing to find humility as an ideal. All right, let's just be clear. I was beaten into this, and I'm grateful to have finally gotten to a point where it's something that I really strive for and want to attain, because it almost took me down. Not having it definitely almost took me down. It was only at the end of a long road marked by successive defeats and humiliations and the final crushing of our self-sufficiency that we began to feel humility as something more than a condition of groveling despair. Every newcomer in Alcoholics Anonymous is told and soon realizes for himself that this humble admission of powerlessness over alcohol is his first step towards liberation from its paralyzing grip. So, it is that we first see humility as a necessity. But this is just the barest beginning. to get completely away from our aversion to the idea of being humble, to gain a vision of humility as an avenue to true freedom of the human spirit, to be willing to work for humility as something to be desired for itself, it takes most of us a long, long time. It took me quite a while. This is going to be underlined. It says, a whole lifetime geared to self-centeredness cannot be set in reverse all at once. Rebellion dogs us at it every step at first, and when I was trying to get this program down, asking God's help, I was placed in situations all the time where I could do the wrong thing. It took a lot of work to, really understand that, I wanted to do the right thing and to make sure I did do the right thing and get there. But, there's opportunities all the time for me to do the wrong thing. I'm grateful that I don't choose not to go there. Because why? Because that's not what God's will is for me today. This is also underlined. It says, when we finally have admitted without reservation that we are powerless over alcohol, we are apt to breathe a great sigh of relief, saying, well, thank God that's over. I'll never have to go through that again. Then we learn, often to our consternation, that this is only the first milestone on our new road that we are walking. Still goaded by sheer necessity, we reluctantly come to grips with those serious character flaws that made problem drinkers of us in the first place. Flaws which must be dealt with to prevent a retreat into alcoholism once again. Procrastination, lying, cheating, infidelity, manipulation. To a lot of people, these are outside issues, because they don't speak solely to drinking alcohol or not drinking alcohol. But, I don't see anything as being an outside issue that could bring you back to the substance at all. If it can bring you back to the person you used to be before you got here, I don't see it as being an outside issue. I see it as really practicing these principles in all our affairs. And Bill W. is trying to get you to understand that. It says we want to be rid of some of these defects, but in some instances, this will appear an impossible job from which we will recoil, as we cling with a passionate persistence to others, which are just as disturbing to our own equilibrium, but we still enjoy them too much. Okay, like we talked about last week in step 6, we hold on to some of these things, gossip, character assassination, stuff that I even catch myself still doing. Okay, because it makes us feel grandiose, or for whatever reasons, we still hold on to some of these things. How can we possibly summon the resolution and the willingness to get rid of such overwhelming compulsions and desires? But again, we are driven on the inescapable conclusion that which we draw from AA experience, that we surely must try with a will or else fall by the wayside. At this stage of our progress, we are under heavy pressure and coercion to do the right thing. We are obliged to choose between the pains of trying and the certain penalties of failing to do so. It's a tough spot to be in. These initial steps along the road are taken grudgingly, yet we do take them. We still may have no very high opinion of humility as a desirable personal virtue, but we do recognize it as a necessary aid to our survival. Okay? It says, but when we have taken a square look at some of these defects, have discussed them with another, and have become willing to have them removed, our thinking about humility commences to have a wider meaning. So, as a result of working 4, 5, 6, and getting to 7, it starts to change how we look at this thing. We look at it as something that we need to have. Okay? This is something that helps us remove the pain. By this time, in all probability, we have gained some measure of release from our more devastating handicaps. This next sentence is going to be highlighted yellow for promises. This is promised. We enjoy moments in which there's something like real peace of mind. I never really had real peace of mind before I started doing this work. There was always some kind of stress, or it's just amazing, how I got to a point where as a result of doing this work, I was able to trust my own thinking, which is, my own thinking always got me in trouble. Peace of mind, just to have that inner peace. It's a wonderful thing. To those of us who have hitherto known only excitement, depression, or anxiety, in other words, to all of us, this newfound peace is a priceless gift. And it is priceless. Something new indeed had been added. Where humility had formerly stood for force feeding on humble pie, it now begins to mean the nourishing ingredient which can give us serenity. The improved perception of our humility starts another revolutionary change in our outlook. Our eyes begin to open to the immense values which have come straight out of painful ego puncturing. Until now, our lives have been largely devoted to running from pain and problems. That was my story, whether it be, unpaid bills, people I have, beefs with, whatever it is, I drank to get away from those things. I used to get away from those things. Today, I don't run from those things. We fled from them as from a plague. We never wanted to deal with the fact of suffering. Escape via the bottle was always our solution, or escape via whatever the substance was. For me, it was always my solution. Character building through suffering might be all right for saints, but it certainly didn't appeal to us. It definitely didn't appeal to me. Then in AA, we looked and listened. Everywhere we saw failure and misery transformed by humility into priceless assets. We heard story after story of how humility had brought strength out of weakness. In every case, pain had been the price of admission into a new life. But this admission price had purchased much more than we expected. It brought a measure of humility, which we soon discovered to be a healer of pain. This is going to be underlined. It says we begin to fear pain less and desire humility more than ever. We start to get to the point where we want this. We start to get to the point where we're realizing that our confidence really, it grows when we're relying on our higher power, and that takes humility. Asking God to remove these defects of character or these shortcomings. Okay. During this process of learning more about humility, the most profound result of all was the change in our attitude toward God. This is very important. I have all this underlined. It says, and this is true whether we had been believers or unbelievers. We began to get over the idea that the higher power was sort of a bush league pinch hitter to be called upon only in an emergency. And that's how it was for me. Anytime I needed something, it was go to God. A lot of times it was when, I was in some kind of trouble that I created at my own hands. It's like these foxhole prayers. If I'll never drink again, get me out of this one, things like that. God is not supposed to be called upon in a pinch. This program, the understanding of the original program of AA, everything starts and ends with God. God's he bats clean up, lead off. You know what I mean? Steals bases, hits home runs. He's not some kind of specialist that we go to just when we need something. The whole program is predicated and starts and ends with the power of God. It's like a reiteration of steps 2 and 3 here. The notion that we should still live on our own lives, God helping a little now and then, it began to evaporate. I couldn't tell you how happy I was when that started to dissipate for me, because my life was getting better. And I knew it was getting better because I was giving it over to the God of my understanding. Many of us who had thought ourselves religious awoke to the limitations of this attitude. This is going to be all underlined. It says, refusing to place God first, we had deprived ourselves of his help. But now the words of myself, I am nothing, Father doeth the works, began to carry bright promise and meaning. Okay, so then this is the standards that we set up to God's will. We're just trying to do God's will, as much as possible. We saw we couldn't always be bludgeoned and beaten into humility. It could come quite as much from our voluntary reaching for it as it could come from our unremitting suffering. I'm grateful today it comes from the former rather than the latter. I'm tired of suffering. Today I don't suffer anymore. A great turning point in our lives came when we sought for humility as something we really wanted, rather than something we must have. I have stars around that sentence. That if that's you, that's the goal. We're looking at this as something that we want, rather than something that we have to have. It's like meeting attendance. I want to go to a meeting. I don't have to go to a meeting. I know there's nothing about going to a meetings that can absolutely keep me sober, because I've been placed beyond human aid. I want a measure of humility in my life. I don't feel like I have to have it. And that is a huge turning point. And like the epic of me actually working steps, and it can be for you too. You don't have to suffer, and you don't have to wait. You don't have to be one of those people who's like me, who learned the hard way. If you're new and you're watching this, you can get this from right now. It marked the first time when we could commence to see the full implication of step 7. Humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. Page 76, last page. As we approach the actual taking of step 7, it might be well if we AAs inquire once more about what our deeper objectives are. Each of us would like to live at peace with himself and with his fellows. We would like to be assured that the grace of God can do for us, but we cannot do for ourselves. We have seen that character defects based upon short-sighted and unworthy desires are the obstacles that block our path towards these objectives. Okay, so now we're going way, way deeper than drinking and drugging. You know, we're talking about stuff that just keeps us sick. You can stay sick and not drink. Okay, it's a lot of people do this. I did it for a long, long time. This is going to be underlined. It says we now clearly see that we have been making unreasonable demands upon ourselves, upon others, and upon God. I definitely did that. The chief activator of our defects has been self-centered fear. Let's go ahead and circle the word self-centered fear. Primarily fear that we would lose something we already possess or would fail to get something we demanded. That's important to understand that that's the chief activator. That's like the number one thing that triggers our defects. Okay? Living upon a basis of unsatisfied demands, we were in a state of continual disturbance and frustration. Therefore, no peace was to be had unless we could find a means of reducing these demands. The difference between a demand and a simple request is plain to anyone. So it's really breaking it down and showing us that the biggest problem of this is that, you know, we're afraid. You know, selfish, self-centered, self-seeking fear. Okay? The 7th step is where we make the change in our attitude, which permits us, with humility as our guide, to move out of ourselves and toward others and toward God. That's that altruism that we talk about so much in the big book, you know, that selflessness. You know, this is not some kind of selfish program. You know, this is a help others program. This is do God's will, and a lot of times that entails getting out of yourself. The whole emphasis of step 7 is on humility. The whole rest of this paragraph I have underlined. You can underline it and highlight it. It is all that important. I got stars are all around it. I mean, it's the culmination, you know. It is really saying to us that we now ought to be willing to try humility and seeking the removal of our other shortcomings, just as we did when we admitted that we were powerless over alcohol in step 1, okay, and came to believe in a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity in step 3. If that degree of humility could enable us to find the grace by which such a deadly obsession could be banished, then there must be hope of the same result in respecting any other problem we could possibly have. You know, and I learned by doing this step that, you know, when I'm willing to admit that a problem exists, you know, then a solution becomes apparent. You know, and I learned about these problems by doing my 4th step and admitting to my sponsor, you know, my part in these things in step 5 and, you know, getting them down on paper in step 6 and then asking God to remove them in step 7. My experiences, you know, I've had to be patient with content with patient improvement in a lot of areas, but most of these areas I found a lot of relief from. And, you know, if I'm doing better today than I was doing better yesterday, I think it was definitely worth doing this step. And I just believe that steps 6 and 7, they're like the forgotten steps. They just can't be glossed over with a minimum of concern. We see so many people concerned with just not drinking, you know, and that's important because you can't go anywhere with this work if you're going to be loaded. You know, sobriety is absolute precursor to recovery, but there's more to it than just that. You know, getting well in all our affairs and practicing these principles in our lives is the goal, and humility is a big part of not only just step 7 but of all 12 steps. And so that's step 7 out of the 12 and 12. We're now wrapping up the area of the step work where, you know, we've gotten right with God, you know, in steps 1, 2, and 3, and now we've gotten right with ourselves in 4, 5, 6, and 7, and we're moving into the area where we're about to get right with another human being in steps 8 and 9. So next week we're going to pick up back in the chapter of called Into Action, steps 8. What I would be doing now is I'd be looking at our 4-step inventory and picking out the names of the people, and from that inventory, more times than not, a lot of those people are going to be on our amends list. and be willing to make them, end up on that list. Make a list of the people to which we have done harm or have had behaviors that are not conducive to the type of person that you would want to be or God would want you to be today. People we owe money, people we've hurt. Use the list, because it definitely helps. Using your 4-step guide that that inventory that you've come up with. But pray and meditate and ask, for more to be revealed, disclosed to you about who belongs on that list. And we're going to pick up there next week. A big part of the growth of my process was the amends process. And I'm in 13 years now, and I can honestly say, I had never done it, until about 2 years ago. And recently, more had been revealed to me, and more people had been put in my path, and I've continued to make these amends, and it feels really good to keep my, to clean up my side of the street. Feels really good to be able to not only talk it but walk it. Feels really good. And so that's all for today. I hope everyone's doing well. Hope your families are doing well. Hope you guys are staying cool where you're at. It's really hot here. My name is Dexter, recovered drug addict alcoholic. Thank you for allowing me to serve. And until next week, continue to pay attention for sure. Pay it forward as much as you possibly can. Giving back and helping other people is the goal here. Nothing works for more addicts and alcoholics than doing that. And to rely on God and not on others. Remember, if you're anything like me, and I think you may be, if you're watching this, you placed yourself beyond human aid, and we had to have God's help. And so, another submission will be out next week sometime. Try to have it for you Monday, and we'll go from there. I hope you guys are feeling as good as I'm feeling. Thank you again for allowing me to serve. Until such time, namaste.